You're listening to the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
Tonight, folks, we got a show that's going to blow your doors off. We have none other to lead off the show than wrestling legend Bobby Fulton of the Fantastics. Bobby, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. You know, it's a privilege to get a chance to be on this show. And as we were talking earlier before we got on, I know we got a lot in common, but I'm just thankful for the opportunity to get out here and talk to you gentlemen and also the great wrestling fans in the listening and the audience.
Well, we're real humbled to have you on, Bobby, and I wanted to get started, if it's okay with you. Because I think everybody gets hooked that's in this business as long as you and I are. I mean, we're the same age exactly. You've been doing it a little bit longer than me because you broke in much younger than me. But I think that the passion, but what ignited that first spark, that fire that made you think that I have to do this?
Well, I'll tell you, it might take me just a little bit of time, but I'll try to explain to you. Probably when I was about 6 or 7 years old, we got 3 channels in Chillicothe, Ohio. It was 4, 6, and 10. And we had tubes in our TV, and if the TV messed up, we jumped up and down to get it straightened out. But nevertheless, there was big-time wrestling on, and it was the Sheik and Bobo Brazil and Flying Fred and Wild Bull Curry and Baron Von Raschke and all of them. And I happened to be passing the TV or changing those 3 channels, and I seen wrestling. And it must have been in my DNA because I was hooked instantly, and it was something that I could never shake or get away from. Later on, playing youth Little League, I just recently ran into my baseball coach, and he said, I'll never forget Jimmy Hines asking you what you wanted to be at the age of 9 years old when you played full and battery, and you looked at me and said, Coach, I want to be a professional wrestler. I want to travel the world. I want to be featured on national and international television worldwide. And he said that even today in 2015, when he gets a new team, he tells them the story of Jimmy Hines. That if you have a dream, that you can achieve your dream only if you have the passion to fulfill your dream. And I knew I answered more than your question there, but I just wanted to share that with each and everybody because here's the deal. And we spoke about this earlier. I told you it must have been within my DNA, and there's some strange breed that comes with professional wrestlers, come what may, different backgrounds, different parts of the country, different parts of the world, but there's a common thread that pulls us all together as the boys, and that's a term that we used to use, being a part of the boys, and I know there's girls in wrestling, but they were a part of the boys, those within the wrestling fraternity, that draws us together, and it's within our DNA that drives us to do what we do. And as Cue Ball, I think, said earlier, we wrestled when we were hurt. We did whatever it takes to make it, and that is the passion and that DNA within us. But what got me started was that first time I seen it on that Channel 6. I was hooked for a lifetime, and I told you all earlier, my mother said, Jim, what are we going to do? This boy's obsessed with wrestling. He watches it every Saturday because it's only on 1 hour. He buys these wrestling magazines up at the local drugstore and reads these magazines of all these wrestlers, of Bruno Sammartino and Freddie Blassie and the Sheik of Wild Bull Curry. What are we going to do? My dad said, it's a phase he's going through, Nance. Don't worry about it. It'll soon pass. And they're gone, and I'm 55, and I still have the passion on this October 2015 that I had when I was 6 or 7 years old for the greatest sport in the entire world, bar none, and that is professional wrestling.
Wow. You can feel the passion in every word you deliver, Bobby. You can't fake that. That's 100% real.
Hey, what's that word fake around me?
Yeah, you get slapped real hard for saying that. You get the taste smacked out of your mouth for saying that, one of the old school boys. Bobby, let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Give us a little history to you starting training, who you trained with, who broke you in, and what that training was like.
Well, I'll tell you what happened, guys. Back when I broke into wrestling, they didn't want people in the wrestling business for some strange reason. It wasn't like today. There wasn't any schools. I mean, if you knew someone, it was easy to get in. But being from Chillicothe, Ohio, I just happened to. What was funny in the early, well, from the 20s to 1965 or the 30s, Al Haft one of the originators of the National Wrestling Alliance, ran out of Columbus, Ohio. And there was a couple of wrestlers from Chillicothe, one named Leon Graham, who was a shooter and a hooker, and the other was Hank Vest, and there was a few other guys from Chillicothe that had started an outlaw wrestling company. And what I'm saying outlaw was that if you wasn't a part of the National Wrestling Alliance, the largest governing body of professional wrestling. Of course, we knew the American Wrestling Association had about a 4 or 5 state territory, and then the WWF had the Northeast, and then of course California had the WWA. But most of the other things was fully with the NWA. But if you wasn't a part of them, then you were considered an outlaw, not an independent. Well, nevertheless, at about 11 or 12, I just happened to go to school with one of the boys, one of the wrestlers' sons, and I went and set the ring up. Well, we would hurry up and set the ring up and try to get in the ring and roll around before the crowd came in. Now, keep in mind, guys, we weren't allowed in the dressing room. The wrestlers came, although they were outlaw wrestlers, they had regular jobs, which today wrestlers say they're shoot jobs. They had regular jobs, but these guys wrestled whenever. As a matter of fact, Leon Graham wrestled a 6 and 7 night schedule, and he would work the regular job at Chillicothe Telephone Company. He would jump in the car and have a driver and go to these shows in which Lou Thesz was a part of. Buddy Rogers was a part of, because I've seen the programs. As a matter of fact, they were in the dressing room. Hank Vest and Lou Thesz was Hank Vest and Leon Graham was in the dressing room the night Bill Miller and the other guy, Carl Gotch, broke the arm of Buddy Rogers in a dressing room in Columbus, which was something that happened years ago. But nevertheless, I started setting the ring up with them. They never talked out of school. They never talked smart to us. That we weren't allowed in the dressing rooms. They kayfabed the whole time, the whole way, even though we were setting the ring up. And they would have 2 to 3 matches on a show. All the matches was 2 out of 3 falls back then. And I basically started learning by just getting in the ring, rolling around a little bit. But they would never really break me into the wrestling business. I started by actually getting in touch with a guy who later went on to be Zoltan the Great, Ken Jugan, who out of Pennsylvania, and wrote him a letter. We were pen pals, and he said they were starting a wrestling company in Clarksburg, West Virginia. And at 16, I had my father. We contacted K&H. As a matter of fact, those guys would not even give me the information to get wrestling trunks and boots, but they thought the only place to get them was K&H out of Johnstown, Ohio, which I still have the first catalog they ever sent me with my name, Bobby Fulton. I had written on it because I just thought Jimmy Hines just don't sound like a name that people would want to buy tickets to see. So I came up with Bobby Fulton. I had my first match without really any training in Clarksburg, West Virginia, against a guy who was having his first match, and the locker room emptied because they thought we were going to kill each other. Because on the way down, I told my dad, I said, Dad, if this stuff isn't real, I don't think I want to continue in it. He said, son, if it's not real, that gives you more reason to want to do it because you'll last longer in it. But I was rope burned and mat burned from head to toe. My first match, I got paid $5 in 1977. We drove 350 miles round trip. I signed 3 autographs, and I was on top of the world. I'd had my first professional wrestling match at 16 years of age.
Wow. Didn't sleep for 3 days.
No. It was the greatest night of my life. I mean, here I was. I started at 16, but what even got even gooder, and I'll use that word gooder, that I went down, I wrestled the next couple of months, and then Flying Fred Curry and Wild Bull Curry had opened up a company in Columbus. And we happened to go to one of their shows, and a friend of mine, Ken Mick, and I, and Fred said, would one of you referee? I said, sure, I'll do anything you want me to do. You see, that's the problem, Cue Ball, with today's guys. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I was even at a show a couple years ago. I was popping the popcorn. And Dusty Rhodes walked in. He said, Bobby Fulton, you're willing to do any? I said, yes, I am. Even today, I was popping the popcorn at a show in Lenore, North Carolina, at the Mulberry Street Rec Center in wrestling. But what I was getting ready to say, I told Flying Fred Curry, sir, I'll do whatever it takes. I later went on to become his traveling opponent when he would wrestle on all these outlaw independent shows. And then it got me a chance to go to New York to wrestle in the WWF on the Hamburg and Allentown reading shows that they had back then.
Yeah, those were the big taping events when they taped for television back in the day.
Yes.
That's an amazing story, Bobby.